There is nothing outside a man which by going into him can defile him, but the things which come out of a man are what defile him. Dear brothers and sisters in Christ, we are in the 22nd Sunday in ordinary time, and we reflect on the Gospel according to Mark chapter 7 verse 1 to 8, 14 to 15, and 21 to 23. In Mark's Gospel account, the Pharisees show up primarily as a foil to Jesus and disciples. The role of Pharisees in the Gospel of Mark is to question what Jesus' disciples are doing and later to test him, Jesus himself. And we can notice the following pattern. In Mark 2:16, we see on how they ask, why does Jesus eat with tax collectors and sinners? Mark 2:18, why don't Jesus' disciples fast? Mark 2:24, they ask, why aren't Jesus' disciples observing the Sabbath? And for today, core issue is, why don't Jesus' disciples eat with defiled hands? Furthering with the account of Mark, they also started asking Jesus for a sign from heaven to test him, as Mark 8:11. They continued asking Jesus about the lawfulness of divorce to test him, as in Mark 10:12. And finally, they asked Jesus about the lawfulness of taxes to trap him, as in Mark 12:13 to 15. In the Gospel passage of today, Jesus is being questioned by the Pharisees about why his disciples are not practicing the traditions of elders, which is to cleanse themselves before their meals. Jesus responds saying, well, did Isaiah prophesy about you hypocrites? As it is written, these people honor me with their lips, but their hearts are very far from me. In vain do they worship me, teaching as doctrines human precepts. You disregard God's commandment, but cling to human tradition. I am well pleased with Jesus saying, since it makes us really look at ourselves and the world around us. Especially in today's society, we are always faced with many rules of our society and the rules of God. Things that can be acceptable in our society may not be acceptable and pleasing to God. It is very easy to fall under the influence of our society's norms. What we see on televisions, the lyrics in the songs we listen to, and things we read on the internet, and all seem to be okay because we have become desensitized with the norms of societies, and when in reality they are not pleasing to God. The scholars write, The Greek word koinos does not in itself mean defiled or unclean. It is the word of common, that is ordinary. The Pharisees believed that the food should be eaten with sanctified hands, not ordinary hands. The Pharisees were much concerned about external things. And we can say that the Pharisees were hypocrites for two reasons. Firstly, their actions are merely external, a show of piety rather than what is coming from the heart. Secondly, their teachings of traditions are not God's law, and thus they are not of equal value with God's commandment. We can also sometimes be in line with the Pharisees. We can make signs of the cross. We can genuflect. We can listen to gospel music. We can come to religious services and go even for pilgrimages. And sometimes this does not make us virtuous, and neither pleases God, our Creator. Instead, we rather focus on the eternal things, which are prayers, reflections, and meditations. And I did not mean the former to be less important than the latter, but it will all depend on our motives. The thoughts we have within us are what makes us who we are. We can put on so many masks or good in front of people, but God sees what is in our hearts. And what is in our hearts is also reflected in our actions. We must continue to pray to God and ask Him to fill us with His grace so that we can live our lives better in a loving and pleasing way.